Well, we have to start this one with a little disclosure. Jim Lehrer and I have been friends for many, many, many years. When he was the managing or city editor, I guess, the Dallas Times-Herald, I was the police reporter at the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, and so we kind of kept up with each other. So everything I say and ask about in this interview, Jim, we have to warn people they have to take it in that context.
With a grain
I said
of salt.
we've known each other for a long time. I didn't say that I'd liked you, but we've known each other for a long time. Jim has written a fine book called Tension City, and it is the story of the presidential debates. And Jim, I guess you do hold the record for having done most of them, more than anybody else, I would think.
Well, there have been 35. I've done 11 of them. So that's not bad.
That's a great record.
Yeah,
I don't think it'll ever be matched. The book has a good title, Tension City, because I remember when, as you put in this book, when I was asked to do it, been on television for a long time, so long.
And you
that,
have said that you can pay for this by rolling back the
but when I was
president's tax
standing
cut on the upper
backstage
2%.
in 2004,
You heard the president say
waiting to go
earlier
on
tonight that it's going to
do a
cost a whole lot
presidential
more
debate,
money
my
than
first,
that. I just
I
asked
was like
you,
a kid
where
who's
are you
being
going to
on
get
television for the
Well,
first
two
time.
leading
I was
national-
literally shaking. There's nothing quite like a presidential debate, is there?
No, and it's for everybody who's involved. From the moderator is just one of many who is shaking. The candidates, of course, it begins with the candidates and their handlers and all of that. But everybody who's doing the sound and doing the lighting and all, everybody connected with it because the stakes are there's nothing for which the stakes are any higher, at least in American politics, and everybody knows that, and they never ever forget it. At least if they do, they forget it at their peril.
Yeah. What? There must be a favorite that you would pick out.
Well, you know, the problem, I'm sure it's the same with you, Bob. I tend to remember the dumb things I've done rather than the good things I've done. In my first, with the first of my 11, was George H.W. Bush versus Michael Dukakis. Bush was in the middle of a question. I mean, he was giving an answer, a question I had asked, and he was right in the middle of it, and I misread the cues from the lights, you know, and I said, Mr. Vice President, your time is up. And he looked at the lights, which were on the camera, and he said, no, I still got time. And I heard those awful words in my ear from the executive producer. He said, he's right, you're wrong. So I said, oh, Mr. President, I'm Mr. Vice President, go ahead, sorry. And you were right. And he looked at me, and the whole world heard him say, I lost my track of thought. I forgot what I was saying. And of course, I wanted to drop into a big hole. And that was my, and it happened in the first debate. And anything you do wrong in one of these, and I've done several things wrong. Fortunately, I don't think I've done anything wrong in any of the 11 that I thought cost the debate or cost anybody the election, which is 99% of the concern for everybody, at least it should be.
But you're right, though, things do go wrong. The time that the sound went off in that debate, that was, Jerry Ford, right?
Ford and Jimmy Carter went off for 27 minutes. And Jimmy Carter and Gerald Ford stood there like two poles, didn't even look at each other, didn't talk, didn't move. And Edwin Newman said, hey, I'll get you a chair if you guys would like to sit down. And Newman said, not only would they not take the chairs, they wouldn't even acknowledge I offered them the chairs because they wanted to show, they were afraid they wanted to show strength. And I talked to both of them afterward, because fortunately it's in the book too. I was able over 20 years to interview all these presidential, vice presidential candidates about their experiences on the debates, and both of them agreed that they shared looking like idiots, and it hurt both of them in terms of their presidential demeanor and temperament and all that sort of stuff.
The moderators don't get into all the negotiations that come before the debates, but it's amazing the things that one side will come in and demand and the other will reject, and this goes back and forth, even to the
Let me just stay on Social Security with a new question for
there are two things
Senator Kerry.
that,
Because Senator Kerry, you have just said you will not
neither you
cut
nor I
benefits.
nor any other
Alan
moderators ever
Greenspan, the
involved.
chairman
The
of
ones
the
that always
Federal
gave me
Reserve,
two of them
says
that
there's
gave
no
me
way
the
that
greatest
Social
kind
Security
of fun
can pay
was
retirees
all because of Kennedy-Nixon. That was the first one. And remember, Nixon perspired because he'd had fever, he'd been sick and all of that, and it was in a TV studio. In fact, the CBS studio and WBBM, CBS station in Chicago, is where that first debate was. And Nixon was perspiring over his lip, and of course, ever since then, everybody said, oh, you can't perspire. So the negotiation, there was one negotiation in a debate that I was involved in. I wasn't involved in the negotiation, but they told me that one of the candidates' handlers demanded that it be 58 degrees where that podium was. And then the other candidate wanted it to be 64 degrees. So the technical problem was, how in the hell do you have this? Wouldn't be one temperature and the other. But my experience, I bet yours is the same. Every debate I was in, it didn't matter where it was, what kind of stage it was or whatever. It was always like working in a meat locker because it was ice cold. Because perspiration was considered the enemy of a candidate on television in a debate.
And sometimes the height. There's always a question of one candidate they don't want one to be taller than the other.
Well, George H.W. Bush, 6'4", something like that. Michael Dukakis was not 6'4". And so there was a huge negotiation over how much you could put behind. In other words, they didn't want to put a box there because they want to read that story that Michael Dukakis was standing on a box. So what they did is create a little lump, but they then negotiated how much taller Dukakis could be. It was crazy. Here again, I wasn't there for the negotiations. I was just told about them later.
but by the time you get to the debate, I mean, all these kind of matters, people think, well, they're debating on matters of substance. Really, they're not. Most of the debating is about the cosmetics of it.
Cosmetics and reaction shots. That became a big deal after all that sign and all of that Gore did with George W. Bush in 2000 and everything. You're right. It's not about the serious stuff.
I must say about this book, what's fun about it is that on almost every page there's some sort of little revelation. And I mean, having covered politics all these many years, I would run across things time after time in the book where I say, well, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's something I'd forgotten about and say, oh yeah, now I remember, and it would trigger another thought. But it is just fascinating.